Okay, right now we're going to talk about the game Blastar from 1993. It's an Amiga exclusive by Core Design, and I don't think it gets talked about enough. It has a lot of cool technical things in it. So let's take a deep dive. The game has different types of levels. This first one is like a multi-directional scrolling one, sort of like Amnios from Psygnosis. So first of all, let's take a look at the sprites. There's extensive use of sprites in this game. So if we take the bit planes off, look at that. Sprites is a lot of stuff. Okay, if we take the sprites off and go through one by one, sprite 0, you got the score here and the meter here, and these are only three colors. So this light green, the dark green, and then this color is copperized, which we'll see later. And then we got half of your player's ship, and then down here, which is also copperized for the radar. And then sprite 1, it finishes the second half, 15 colors of the player's ship, and then some more HUD elements. And then sprite 2, more elements, and the second half is started of your ship. Sprite 3 finishes off the ship and finishes off the bombs here. And then 4, you get some more elements. 5 more elements. And then 6, you get some stars, which are vertically multiplexed. You see none of them are on the same scan line. And then sprite 7, some more stars, but these ones are just static. Okay, let's build up the bit planes and see how many colors we're dealing with. With bit plane 0, 1, 2, and 3. So it's got 4 bit planes, 16 colors. Let's check out the palette visualizer. There you go, 16 colors. But when you go down here and see the colors, it says 57. So why is that? Well, if we put the copper visualizer on, you can see right here with the green that it's changing this one color in the sprite. So it changes it all the way down here from green to yellow to orange. So you get a bunch more colors there. And then also down here for the radar, it's changing dark green, lighter green. So you get a bunch more colors here. So it also changes the colors for the player ship right here, which is a sprite. So all these colors are in the second half of the palette from 16 to 32. And then down here also you get some of the radar elements that are changed. So the sprite colors, even though it's only 15 really, you get a lot more than that. So that's what accounts for the 57 colors that you see on screen. You can see these things even better if you use the copper block. So we'll move this to the top. And then if you look at the meter on the side here, you can see how it's all green right now. But as we move down, it will become, yeah, there's yellow and orange. And then watch right when we get to the green lines here for the player ship, how it'll all switch. Boom, there he is. And then right now the radar at the bottom is still your player ship color, but then when you get down to this green line right there, then it changes. And then with these green lines, you get the sort of gradient on the sprite too that you can see as you go down. So if we throw on the Blitter visualizer, look at that, it's blitting the whole screen, but in all these little squares. You can see the blits are going crazy here. And then if we look at the DMA stats, yeah, the blitter, look at all the slots going there and the CPU. So it's the idle frames are pretty low at times, but it's all at 50 frames per second. So it didn't make too much sense to me why it was blitting the whole background like that until you get to level 2. Now check out level 2. Look at the background here. It does all this really cool warped effect. And if you look at the copper visualizer, you see that it's still the same setup. So it must be using the blitter because now when you put the blitter visualizer on, it makes more sense. So yeah, this effect is really impressive. Let's just fly around for a bit to check it out. I've got invincibility on. So yeah, very, very nice. And now when we get to the boss, the screen gets bigger and it doesn't scroll. So with the blitter visualizer on, it's just blitting the boss and your shots. So now we get to the first of the horizontally side-scrolling levels. That's got some really nice parallax here. So let's see what they've changed. If I pause it and take off the bit planes, you can now see that it's in dual playfield mode. There's bit plane 0, 2, and 4. If we play for a second, that's just the front layer. And then pause it again, and bit plane 1, 3, and 5 will be the background layer. And I'll play that. So there you go with all the nice parallax. If we put it all back together and look at the palette visualizer, so we can see that it changes the background colors here to like a darker version than what's on the top. And if you put the copper visualizer on above that, you can see these green color changes. So what's interesting is that it resets the colors each time it changes the bit plane pointers, the purple over here. So just looking at it normally and playing, you can see the bit plane pointers are where the scroll is different, the strips of scrolling in the background. So if we go back to the game and we just look at the back playfield, and we can see this when we visualize it. And yeah, so every time the strip, you see how these strips scroll at different speeds? That's changing the bit plane pointers. So it does it right here and right here, all the way down. So, but it resets the colors. So these aren't really changing. They're the same, like color 15, 0, FA 2, and then color 15, 0, FA 2. So each time that it changes the bit plane pointers, it also resets the colors. And then when it does change the colors is down here, as we saw with the palette visualizer right there. So if you set everything back to normal, the one odd thing is that if you put the Blitter visualizer on, it's still blitting everything in the background, even though there's hardware scrolling with dual playfield for the front and back playfield. So I'm not sure why they're doing this here. Maybe just because it was used in the other levels and it was easier just to keep it the same way. Now we get to the first of the 3D perspective bosses. Your sprite has changed to have a 3D look. And if you look at the Blitter visualizer, it's just doing the boss itself. And then all the flames and fire too is the Blitter. So then to add in even more variety, there's just a normal vertical scrolling level here. So we've had horizontal and 3D and multi-directional and now just vertical. So the Blitter visualizer is the same with this level, doing the whole background. And the copper visualizer, it's sort of the same here with the sprites, but the one bad thing about changing the sprite colors here is that you can't have your ship go any farther, because then your colors would change. So this guy was always my favorite boss. I think he looks really cool. Another 3D perspective one. And so with the Blitter visualizer, you can see that they're blitting his whole body and the shots that are coming at you. And you're a hardware sprite. And with the palette visualizer, you can see it keeps changing the one color white. So that is the flashing thrust down here. Here's the second horizontally scrolling stage. And if there's any slowdown, it's just because my computer is kind of slow. It's 50 frames per second, as you can see down here. This level's in dual playfield also, but as you can see, the first layer is just the enemies. So there's the enemies. And then the other layer is just the background. So it also has the bit plane pointer splits the same as the other horizontal level. And with the palette visualizer, you can see that it changes the colors in the background in these certain areas. So the odd thing though is if you put the Blitter visualizer on, you can see that it's just blitting the enemies. Whereas in the other horizontal level, it was blitting the whole screen. So I'm not sure why. If you have any theories, let me know. This level has a lot of enemies on screen at once. So I think it really helps that it has no foreground. The foreground is just the enemies. So makes it quicker, 50 frames per second down here, and a pretty big screen, 304 by 223. Look at these big guys. Just their tails are being blit, but again, you have 50 frames per second. So this is interesting. If I turn on the Blitter visualizer right before this big boss comes up, watch how it goes from no blitz on the screen to, yeah, look at the whole screen is being blit for this huge guy. And it starts switching between 50 and 25 frames per second because he's so big. So let's look at it without the Blitter visualizer for a sec. And yeah, there's a lot going on. When I first saw this boss, I thought that it might be something like Jim Power, where Jim Power uses the whole map for the boss because it's a dual playfield and the front playfield is just the enemies and there's only the one enemy on here. I thought it might just be moving him around and not blitting him, but it's blitting the whole screen. We'll go back to the visualizer again, and yeah, look at that. So it seems they really liked this idea of blitting the whole screen in this game because they kept coming back to it. Now that we're getting near the end of the game, there's this cool like fire plasma level. So let's take a look at the copper visualizer if I pause it. Okay, so it's changing the color all the way down the screen here with this green, and then also here So it might be better if we have it playing. So let's play it. And yeah, if you hold over here, look at how the color keeps changing, changes and changes. And then if you go to the palette visualizer, this is the color here, it keeps changing. So yeah, this line changes. This line doesn't change. I think it's just the one for the sprite. It's just changing these the meter here. So this level is back to just using the blitter to blit the actual objects and not the background. And this last level starts out scrolling, but then it stops and have the boss fight. Here's the final boss. He's kind of cool looking. If you put the blitter visualizer on, he's all blit. So it's a cool game that uses a lot of different techniques throughout. Let me just pause it here. Yeah, there was every type of scrolling, multi-directional, horizontal, vertical, a little pseudo 3D. The only downside is that, like a lot of other core games, for some reason it's a huge mystery why so many great core games didn't have music and sound effects together. After around like 1991, I find most games, the big games, have sound effects and music together all the time. But for some reason, core, many of their games like Premiere and Bubba and Sticks and lots of them into the later years, beautiful visuals and stuff, but would never have sound effects and music at the same time. Even Banshee, I don't know why Core in particular were the worst for that. But besides that sticking point, Blaster is a very technically impressive game, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And please like and subscribe if you haven't yet. I always appreciate it. Thanks so much. Till next time. Take care.